Okay, we are on Gimel Amud Beis. Let's see how good you are. Any of you guys remember what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I hope so.
Anybody remember what we've been talking about? No, not a clue.
I wasn't here last time.
Witnesses.
I'm glad nobody said Sotah. All right, Baruch Hashem.
I was tempted. Is that what we've been talking about?
All right, the last, we had, we'll refresh your memory. We had 3 cases where Rebbe Akiva and Rebbe Yishmael disagreed about whether it was a must or a may. All right, the last thing that we learned was about a Kohen being mitame himself to one of his relatives. Must he be mitame himself to one of his relatives? That was Rebbe Akiva's position. May he be mitame himself to one of his relatives, but not must he? That was Rebbe Yishmael's position. And remember, they went back and forth, and we even spoke about whether you can be mitame, whether Kohen is obligated, or may he be mitame himself to avarim, to limbs that are severed from an individual. Okay, so now we're going to begin the third case. Right? What was the first case, by the way? That was the second case. The second case was about the Kohen. The third case we're going to learn is about the Eved Kenana, the Eved Kenani. First case was the warning, whether a husband, must he warn his wife? Or is it only an option? May he warn his wife? Okay, but he doesn't have to. Okay. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down. Right in the middle of the line, the word is la'olam. And the Gemorah is quoting the pasuk la'olam bahem ta'avodu. This is pasuk Aleph. Let's look at pasuk Aleph in the Gimel Amud Beis. Sorry, did I say Gimel Aleph? I apologize. Gimel Amud Beis. Source Aleph. Right, in the Torah or Hashalem, in the margin over here. Right, we're right over here in the margin up here. See? All right, source number Aleph. Right, what does it say? V'hisnachaltem osam livinechem acharechem lareshes achuzas, right, lareshes achuzas leolam bahem ta'avodu. Uva'achechem b'nei Yisrael ish ba'achiv lo sirde bo bifarech. Here it's talking, what the pasuk is talking about is coming into Eretz Yisrael. When Bnei Yisrael were coming into Eretz Yisrael to inherit it, so they had to conquer the land. Right? They had to conquer the land, and the pasuk says, La'olam bahem ta'avodu. That's the pasuk. That's the phrase of the pasuk. That's the part of the pasuk that we're focusing on. What does la'olam bahem ta'avodu mean? Well, first of all, what is the pasuk talking? Who is the bahem? Right, what's the bahem? Who is the bahem talking about? All right. So we know that when Bnei Israel came into the land of Israel, they had to kill all of the people who refused to leave. In other words, all of the 7 nations, right? There were 7 nations who lived there. Right, all of those, right? You got them all, right? Right, Chivi, right? The Chivi, right? Okay, so all of those nations, they gave them a choice: either hang around and fight us and be killed, or leave, because we're taking over the land, right?
There's a third option.
There's one, yeah. You were saying, was there an exception?
You're talking about the option to stay and be a ben Noach.
Right.
Yeah.
For this purpose, we're not talking about that. Okay. Right? For this purpose, we're talking about 2 possibilities: either leaving or being killed. Right? Either leaving or being killed. So what are we saying here? So you had to kill all of the people who, if they were there, you had to kill them. If they weren't there, obviously you don't have to go chasing after them to, wherever they go. But if they're in the land, you have to kill them. But the pasuk says, V'hisnachaltem osam Livinechem acharechem lareshes achuzah. That what? That you can v'his nachalasam. You can give them over as a nachala, as an inheritance to your children after you. Lareshes, right? Achuzah leolam, right? Bahem ta'avodu. That as an eternal possession, right? Here we're talking about the halacha of Eved Kanani. Right, Eved Kanani. What was an Eved Kanani? We have to first figure out how can there, what does that term mean? I thought we had to kill all of the Kanani. Right. So how can you have? Right. If you had to kill them all, how could you have an Eved Kanani? So we're gonna have to talk about that. But for the time being, let me translate it as a non-Jewish Eved. What's the halacha by a non-Jewish Eved? So a non-Jewish Eved is considered to be property for you. If you have a non-Jewish Eved, he is your property. And that means that just like your field can be passed down to your son, and your car can be passed down to your son, so too your Eved is passed down to your son. Because
Up until the Yovel.
no, not for a non-Jewish Eved. A non-Jewish Eved is an Eved le'olam, right? That's it. There's only one way in which a non-Jewish Eved can stop. Well, there's only one possible way, maybe, in which a non-Jewish Eved can stop being an Eved.
You're free. You set him free.
And that would be if you set him free. Mm-hmm. So the machlokes between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva is, may you set him free? Right? What does la'olam bahem ta'avodu mean? Does it mean you are not allowed to set him free? You must work him forever, meaning you must keep him as an Eved forever, and when you're done, meaning you pass on, so he gets passed down with
his children and
right, and so la'olam, right, forever, la'olam, okay?
There's a change of the phraseology.
What?
It goes from Nachala to Yerusha. Both inheritances.
Right.
One is
Different, right?
one is Yerusha, I think, is permanent, or spiritual.
I'm not sure of the difference between Nachala and Yerusha as it's used in the pasuk. I'm not sure. Okay, you're referring to the pasuk, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. The pasuk says v'his nachaltem.
Right.
Where do you see Yerusha?
La
That's not really Yerusha. That's la reshes as the term to acquire.
Oh.
Right. It's not really Yerusha. It's to acquire. Okay. So that's the pasuk that we're looking at, and we're focusing on the words la'olam bohem ta'avodu. Right. La'olam bohem ta'avodu. So if we look at those words la'olam bohem ta'avodu, we're not sure what that means. Right? Rishus, divrei Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael says, as he has said in the previous two cases, in the case of warning your wife, and in the case of the Kohen being mitame himself to his relatives, Rabbi Yishmael has been consistent, and he says Rishus.
This is different. Those two are whether you can do something or may do something. This is whether you may do something or cannot do something.
That's true, but it's the same Rishus. That's only because we're using English words, right? If you stick with the Hebrew words of Rishus or Chova, right? So it's the same argument. In other words, if we say la'olam bahem ta'avodu is Rishus, that means you don't have to own them for the rest of your life, right? And pass them on to your kids. You can let them go. Right? If you say chova, it's an obligation. La'olam bahem ta'avodu is an obligation, which is Rabbi Akiva's position. What does that mean? It means you cannot free them, right? You have to keep them as an eved, and you have to pass them down to your children. They have to get passed down to your children as part of your property. You want to free him? Sorry, you're not allowed to free him. That is the punishment. That is the penalty that he is paying for choosing to remain in the land, right? Choosing to remain in the land. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to get caught up in the philosophy or theology of a slave and non-Jewish, and we're just going to stick to Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, right? So Rabbi Yishmael says Rishus, Rabbi Akiva says Chova. Now, obviously, they didn't just make up these positions based on what their wives said to them in the morning, right? Their positions are based on psukim, right? Like the positions of the previous two cases were based on psukim. So to here, their positions are based on psukim. So the Gemara says, "My taima the Rebbe Yishmael." What is the reason for Rebbe Yishmael? Remember, what does Rebbe Yishmael say? Rishus. Rebbe Yishmael says Rishus. How do we apply Rishus to the case of the non-Jewish Eved?
You can let him go.
It means you are not obligated to eternally work him, to eternally own him, right? You can free him, right? That's what Rishus means here. So what's the rationale? What's the reasoning? What's the reason for Rebbe Yishmael's position that it's Rishus? So Rebbe Yishmael will say to you, Aidi dichsiv lo sechayeh kol nishama. Since the pasuk says, lo sechayeh, do not keep alive any nishama, any soul. Itzrich nami lemichsav, the Torah also had to tell us, le'olam bahem ta'avodu, lemishri, to permit echad mikol ha'umos sheba al ha'kinanis v'holid mimena ben sha'ata rashai liknoso. Okay, what are we talking about here? So we have another pasuk. Look at pasuk bet. All right, what does pasuk bet mean? Well, let's first. What does it say? Rak me'arei ha'amim ha'ele, only regarding these nations, asher Hashem Elokecha nosein lecha nachala, of whose land HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving to you as an inheritance. Lo sechayeh kol neshama, you're not allowed to keep any soul alive. It's a little bit of an unusual way to say it, but basically, you have to kill anybody. You have to kill everybody.
Of these particular nations.
Of these nations. You have to kill everybody of these nations. So Rabbi Yishmael says, wait a second. If you have to kill every one of these nations, so how can you ever have a... How can you ever have... How can you ever have a non-Jewish Eved?
Yeah, but there are other non-Jews besides the
other nations.
Right. There are other nations, but we're talking about somebody who is there. We refer to them as an Eved Kanani, right? Somebody who's. We're not talking about Jews who. We're talking about Jews who are going in to conquer Eretz Yisrael, and they're going to acquire an Eved. So basically, how can you acquire an Eved if you're going in to conquer Eretz Yisrael? How can you acquire an Eved from the people who you're going in to conquer the land from? Because what do you have to do to those people if they hang around? You have to kill them.
Every one of them.
You have to kill them all.
There weren't any nations that were excluded.
Right. No. Well, those were the only nations that were there.
Well, there were 7.
Right.
You had to kill 5.
No, all 7 nations had to be killed. Right. Men, women, children, grandmothers, mother-in-laws, everybody. Right. Right. Everybody. Right. Everybody had. Right. Everybody had to be killed. Okay, everybody had to be killed. Why is a big question, right? Obviously, you know, the idea of leaving them alive in your midst, the Jewish people would never really have been able to build an Eretz Yisrael according to the laws of the Torah if they had allowed these people to remain alive and living next door. You know, you light Hanukkah candles, they put up, Christmas decorations, pasnish, right? You're not going to build an Eretz Yisrael that way.
So, offered the option of
leaving.
They were offered the option of leaving, of course, yes. Okay, so basically, Rebbe Yishmael is saying there is a situation where there is a kind of person who would be found among these nations that you would not have to kill and that person you could acquire as a slave. What's the situation for that? What's the situation? Says Rebbe Yishmael, somebody not of these 7 nations who comes to Israel and has relations with one of the women from these 7 nations. They use the term with an Isha Kanaanis here, but it doesn't mean only of the people of the people known as Canaanim, because it could be a woman from any of the 7 nations.
We're not one of the 7.
That's correct, right? It could be a man who comes from China, whatever, I don't know, and has relations with a Yevusi woman, and they have a child. So the question is, what is the status of that child?
You have to kill them.
Right. What's this? Right. What's the? Do you have to? Right. Do you, right. That's the option. Right. Those are the possible positions, the choices. Either if he goes by his mother is a Yevusi, therefore he's a Yevusi, therefore you have to kill him. On the other hand, maybe he follows his father. If his father's Chinese, right? You don't have to kill him because you're not obligated to kill the Chinese, right? You're only obligated to kill the 7 nations who live there. So he doesn't have to be killed. Well, if he doesn't have to be killed, what do you do with him? So says the Gemorah, right? Says Rabbi Yishmael, you can acquire him.
You can?
Well, yes.
You did acquire him, but you could free him.
No, you can acquire, hold on a second. You can acquire him as an Eved, okay? So what does Rabbi Yishmael say so far? We haven't gotten to the, what does Rabbi Yishmael say so far? He says, one pasuk tells me you got to kill everybody. Another pasuk comes along and tells me
you can own him.
That there's someone you can own as property. How do I resolve those two? So Rabbi Yishmael says, the pasuk that tells me I have to kill everybody, that's clear. The pasuk that tells me I can acquire somebody, it's not telling me I must continually work them. It's simply coming along to give me permission to acquire the offspring of a Canaanite woman and a Chinese guy. Okay?
It has to be, the woman has to be from the 7 Shvatim, not the man.
Hold on, we're going to come to that. But right now, that's what we're saying. We're talking specifically about a man who is not of the 7 nations, who has relations with a woman of the 7 nations. According to Rabbi Yishmael, this pasuk of La'olam Bahem Ta'avodu is coming to tell me that you don't have to kill that child. That you can acquire that child as a non-Jewish Eved. Right? If that's what the pasuk La'olam Bahem Ta'avodu is coming to tell me, that I can acquire this child, the pasuk is coming to be mechadesh. The pasuk is coming to tell me, you don't have to kill this child, you can acquire this child. If that's what the pasuk is doing, so then says Rabbi Yishmael, the pasuk's not telling me, the pasuk can't be telling me also that I have to keep this kid forever, right? The pasuk is coming to tell me one thing. What is that one thing? According to Rabbi Yishmael, it's coming to tell me, here's an exception to the rule. This offspring of the Yevusi woman and the Chinese guy is an exception to the rule. He's not considered a Yevusi. You can acquire him. You can acquire him. That's the whole purpose of this pasuk, to tell me you can acquire him. If that's what the pasuk is coming to tell me, then it's not coming to tell me that I can never free them, right? It's coming to tell me something different. It's coming to tell me I can acquire them. It's not coming to tell me.
It's not telling me that I have to acquire them. It's just telling me that I can acquire them.
Correct. No, there's nothing says you have to acquire them, right? The question is whether you have to work them once you acquire them, right?
Forever.
Forever, correct.
Just a little technical. How do you acquire this person who would be up for grabs to anyone in Bnei Israel? So
Literally, You grab him. You grab him.
That's it. So that's a kid.
You possession is 9/10.
What?
You have
Just
to pay
kidnap
for
him
him?
and
We don't have kidnap.
There's nobody. I mean, who you're kidnapping him from? You're killing
you kill
everybody
his
else.
Mother, you chase off his father because he doesn't not allowed to stay, and the kid's an orphan, so you take him. Right? I mean, you know.
Well, so what about Shiloh Hakan?
The mother's dead.
No, with birds. Oh,
The mother, we kill
with
the
a
mother.
bird, you chase the mother away
And then you kill the bird.
to take the egg.
Right, so here
So
we
here
kill-
you would chase away the mother to take
No,
the
You don't
kill
chase
the
away
mother,
the
you have
mother.
to
You kill the
You
mother.
kill the mother.
Yeah.
Kill the mother.
That's better.
The mother
Okay,
doesn't
as long as you're happy now, right? You kill the mother.
A bird gets a better treatment.
Well,
So this is interesting. How do you acquire him? You just grab him. Right? That's how you acquire someone. You hold on to him. Okay, that's how you acquire them. Okay. So that's Rabbi Yishmael's position, right? Dear Rabbi Yishmael, that's what Rabbi Yishmael says.
You back on?
Yes, that's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Okay.
never went off.
What do you mean? Yes, never.
You just dozed off there for a
All right,
moment.
that's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Chova. No, the pasuk is telling us something different. The pasuk is telling us it's an obligation. But wait a second. If Rabbi Akiva is holding this position, that the pasuk is telling us it's an obligation, so how does he learn that there's an exception to the rule of killing everybody? Right? Rabbi Yishmael used this pasuk as to teach him that there's an exception to the rule of killing everybody. How does Rabbi Akiva learn there's an exception to the rule of killing everybody if he looks at this pasuk, la'olam bahem ta'avodu, to mean you have to work them. You're not allowed to free them. If it's coming to teach you that, how does this work? So Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Akiva. Did I skip? Rabbi Akiva Omer Chova. My time. Oh, I'm sorry. So my time. I got just messed up a line. Okay. So we just learned my time of the Rabbi Yishmael. Aidi dichsiv lo sichaya kol neshama. Itzriach nami lemichtav. The pasuk also has to say lo olam bahem ta'avodu lemishri, to permit echad mikol ha'umos, somebody from the other nations, a man from the other nations, sheba al hakananis, who had relations with a woman from one of these 7 nations, v'holid mimena ben, and they had a son, she'ata rashai liknoso, that you are permitted to acquire this child. This child goes after the father's nationality, right? Goes after the father's nationality. Disanya, as we learn in a brisa, minayan le'echad min ha'umo sheba al ha'kenanis v'holid mimena ben sha'atai rashai liknoso be'eved. How do we know, this is a brisa, right? How do we know, asks the brisa, that if somebody from not one of the 7 nations, in other words, a non-Jew, but not of one of the 7 nations, Shabala Kananis, who has relations with a woman from one of the 7 nations, V'holi mimena ben, and he has a son from her, She'ata rashai liknoso be'eved, that you are allowed to acquire this child as an eved. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, V'gam mi b'nei hatoshavim hagarim imachem mehem tiknu. Okay, this is a third pasuk. All right, what does the pasuk say? The pasuk says, you have it in your notes, Gimel, V'gam mi b'nei hatoshavim hagarim imachem, that also from the ones who are dwelling with you, right? Mehem tiknu, from among them you can acquire. Umi mishpachtam asher imachem asher holidu ba'artzachem v'hayu lachem la'achuza. Right? So the brisa uses a different pasuk. Right? The brisa uses a second pasuk. Rabbi Yishmael uses our pasuk of la'olam bahem ta'avodu. Right? But the brisa, the same point that Rabbi Yishmael learns from our pasuk, the brisa learns from yet a third pasuk. Okay? Yet a third pasuk. Okay, now we're gonna turn our attention. Yachol So what is that brisa saying? Now the brisa continues and says, Yochol af ha-Kinaani sheba al achas min ha'umos v'holid mimena ben she'ata rashai liknoso be'evid. Does it mean that if a Kanaani man moved to China, had relations with a Chinese woman, has a son, brings the son and the woman back to live in Canaan, and now Bnei Israel comes in, are they allowed to acquire that child? Right? We know they can acquire, they are allowed to acquire a child born from a Chinese man and a Kanaani woman.
Right.
Are they allowed, asks the Brisa, to acquire a child from a Kanaani man and a Chinese woman who live in Canaan? So Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, Asher holidu ba'artzechem, born in Israel, right? Born in the territory of these 7 nations. Min hanoladim ba'artzechem, from those who were born in this area of the 7 nations. Velo min hagarim ba'artzechem, and not from those who were born elsewhere. What is the Gemara implying? The Gemara is implying that women generally stay local, whereas men generally travel. So if we're looking for a child who is born here, we are probably referring to a Kanaani woman. If we're talking about a child who's born there and brought back here, so we're probably talking about a Kanaani man.
So this is the origin of birth tourism of, like we have now with the birthright. If you're born in the U.S., you're an automatic citizen. If you're born in Canaan, you're Canaan.
Okay, that'll get on the 11 o'clock news. Okay, all right. So it's an interesting question, right? Interesting question. I mean, so what's saying here is it's saying that if you're born here, no, because just fakir.
If you're born in Canaan, you get citizenship.
No, fakir, just the opposite. If you're born in Canaan to a Canaanite mother and a Chinese father, you're considered Chinese.
Right, you're safe.
Oh, okay.
Right? You're considered Chinese. But if you are born in China to a Kanaani mother and a Chinese man, Kanaani father and a Chinese woman, and then you come back to live here, so
kill you?
Yes, so you are considered now like a regular Kanaani.
So now it's your father controls.
No, but it's ba'artzechem.
No, for us it's a mother that controls.
Right, holidu ba'artzechem. In other words,
born.
Only someone who was born here, meaning only someone where the father was not Jewish, right? Where the father was not one of the 7 nations, that's who you can acquire. But if the mother, right, was not one of the 7 nations, but the father was, so we don't care where that child was born, but if that child lives here now, you got to kill him. And you got to kill him. So basically, we are defining nationality as by father, right? Much different than
religion.
Jewish nationality.
No, our Shevet is by our father.
Right, correct. Our Shevet is by our father.
Born in China by a
right?
That's correct.
Otherwise, I'm joining.
If he comes back to live here, he gets killed.
But it's not Holidu Shama.
Holidu Shama is somebody who you can acquire, not somebody who you have to kill. Okay. Somebody you can acquire. Okay. So far, so good? Still with me? More or less. Okay. So that's the position of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael learns out from this phrase, La'olam Bahem Ta'avodu, that you have permission, the Torah is giving you permission, this pasuk is here so that the Torah can give you permission to acquire someone whose mother was Kanaani and father was Chinese. Okay? Not good. Okay. And then Rabbi Yishmael quotes a brisa, which actually uses a third pasuk to teach this same principle. The Rebbe Akiva. So what is what's Rebbe Akiva doing with all these things? Remember, what does Rebbe Akiva say? Rebbe Akiva says you must keep right. You're not that the pasuk la'olam bahem ta'avodu means
You're not allowed to set them free.
you're not allowed to set this non-Jewish Eved free. You're not allowed to set him free. The Rebbe Akiva. So mimahem tiknu nafka. All right. How does Rebbe Akiva learn?
You could ever acquire anybody.
What?
How could you ever acquire anybody?
Right.
You have to kill them all.
So how does Rebbe Akiva learn that you don't have to kill them all, but if there's someone whose mother was a Canaanite and whose father was Chinese, that you can acquire him? How do you learn that? So says the Gemara, the Rebbe Akiva, mimehem tiknu nafka. Where does Rebbe Akiva learn this? He learns this from the expression mehem tiknu. Where is that expression mehem tiknu? Pasuk Gimel, right? Which is the same pasuk that the Brisa learned it from. That's where Rebbe Akiva learns it from. And if that's where Rebbe Akiva learns it from, and he doesn't need to learn it from the pasuk of la'olam bahem ta'avodu, so la'olam bahem ta'avodu lamali. What do I do now with the pasuk of la'olam bahem ta'avodu? Lichova, right? Lichova, okay? So you're Rebbe Akiva. So what are you going to say to Rebbe Yishmael? You're going to say to right? You're going to say to Rebbe Yishmael, wait a second. This third pasuk, right? This third pasuk, which the Brisa, which you quoted, the Brisa, right? The Gemara quoted the Brisa. That's where I learned that you're allowed to acquire from. I don't learn it from the Olam Bahem Tavodu, and therefore I now have the freedom of Olam Bahem Tavodu to say it means chova. You're not allowed to free this person. You must keep this person enslaved. You're not allowed to free him. So now the obvious question is, well, what about why didn't Rebbe Yishmael, right? Rebbe Yishmael, it seems, learned from Olam Bahem Tavodu, but what about this third pasuk? Right? What happens to this third pasuk? So says the Gemara, the Rebbe Yishmael. Right, Rebbe Yishmael, what does he do with this pasuk, this third pasuk of Mehem Tiknu? What does he do with this pasuk? So Rebbe Yishmael, Bahem, it says, V'lo ba'achechem. Right, Rebbe Yishmael says the pasuk what we learn at is Bahem V'lo ba'achechem. Okay.
Yeah.
Mehem tiknu. Right? It's mehem tiknu v'lo be'achechem. What does that mean? It means that you are allowed, Rebbe Yishmael says, this third pasuk, you know what the third pasuk means? The third pasuk means you're allowed to acquire a non-Jew as a slave and work him as a slave. But you're not allowed to acquire a Jew and work him the same way you work a non-Jewish slave. You can acquire a Jew as a slave, says Rebbe Yishmael, but you're not allowed to work him the way you are allowed to work a non-Jewish slave. The commentary actually gives some examples. In other words, you're not allowed to say to a non-Jewish slave, you can say, I want you to weed this garden until I come back. You can't do that to a Jewish slave. To a Jewish slave, you have to say, I want you to weed this garden for an hour, or for 2 hours, or for 3 hours. But you can't tell a Jewish slave to do something without giving him a time limit. You can to a non-Jewish slave. You can say to a non-Jewish slave, weed the garden until I get back. You're allowed to do that. Can't do that to a Jewish slave. Okay, so there are major differences. That's only one of them. But there are major differences between a Jewish slave and a non-Jewish slave. So Rebbe Yishmael uses the third pasuk to teach us that you
have to treat them different.
Right, that you can, when we talk about acquiring a slave as property, that's only a non-Jewish person, right? You cannot acquire a Jewish person as a slave of property. You can't do that. For Rebbe Akiva,
so how does he learn that?
Right, so that's what Rebbe Yishmael learns, right? For Rebbe Akiva, ba'achechem miseifa dekra nafcha. right? What does Rabbi Akiva say? Rabbi Akiva says, if you look at the end of the pasuk, what does the end of the pasuk say? Uba'achechem b'nei Yisrael, ish be'achiv lo sirde bo b'farech. All right? In other words, look at the end of pasuk Beis. I'm sorry, look at the end of pasuk Aleph. Right? If you look at the end of pasuk Aleph, where does Rabbi Akiva learn that you're not allowed to acquire a Jew as slave property? Where does Rabbi Akiva learn that from? He learns it from the end of source number 1. Because the Torah says, Uva'achechem b'nei Yisrael ish ba'achiv lo sirdu bo b'farech. You can't rule over a Jew, a fellow Jew, b'farech. In other words, you can't acquire another Jew to be a slave property. That you're not allowed to do.
Keywords b'farech. I mean, you could have him as your slave.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah,
So
of
what
course.
for Rabbi
For Rabbi Yishmael, what does Rabbi Yishmael do with that last
That's a
part of the
pretty
pasuk?
explicit statement.
Right, for Rabbi Yishmael says, "Aidi dichsiv uva'achechem." Since the pasuk says, "Uva'achechem nami bahem," I'm sorry. "Aidi dichsiv uva'achechem ksiv nami bahem." In other words, what does it say? Since the pasuk says achechem, right? La'olam bahem ta'avodu, and then it says uva achechem. So Rabbi Yishmael says that it's just a stylistic kind of repetition. In other words, it's a redundancy, but it's a stylistic redundancy. There's nothing to learn from it. L'kititana debei Rabbi Yishmael, as the Bei Rabbi Yishmael learned, the Tana debei Rabbi Yishmael, called Parsha shene'emra v'nishnes, lo nishnes ella bishvil davar shenis chadesh ba. That what? That
no
when,
redundancy.
what?
That there's always something to learn from a redundancy.
On the opposite.
Well, he's saying
No, there's nothing to learn from this.
he's saying this is a stylistic kind of redundancy, right? It's a stylistic kind of redundancy. It's not
Not teaching us.
It's not coming to teach us anything.
I thought every word was supposed to. Right? I mean,
No, but remember we had
No, I know he
we
said that before.
we had
but-
vihi nitmes, vihi lo nitmes. All right. Why does it repeat that? It just repeats it to maintain
Well, that's what he said.
a consistency of style. That's what Rabbi Yishmael is saying. Rabbi Yishmael is saying you can't learn anything from that. That's just there to maintain a consistency of style. Rabbi Akiva says no, it's there to teach me something. So again, the same way in which we have this machlokes between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva in giving your wife warning, the same way we have the machlokes between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva in a Kohen being mitame himself to one of his 7 relatives. So too we have a machlokes between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva concerning freeing a non-Jewish slave. According to Rabbi Yishmael, you can free a non-Jewish slave if you want. According to Rabbi Yishmael, you are not allowed to free a non-Jewish slave. He is property and he gets passed down as property forever. Okay? I'm going to give you we'll get started with the next section of the Gemara. It's a little bit labidic, the next section. We're on 3B2 or 3B3? 3B2. 3B2. Okay, now we're coming back to adultery. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so what does the Gemara say? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, Znusa bebeisa kikaria lishum shama. That adultery in the house, meaning, and he's not talking about adultery that takes place in the house. He's saying that when adultery takes place, it does to the house what a worm does to a sesame seed. What is a worm? Right? What does a worm do to a sesame seed? Right, what does a worm do to a sesame seed? The worm destroys the sesame seed, right? The worm destroys the sesame seed. Interestingly, they make a note here that the worm destroys the sesame seed from the inside, not from the outside. The worm destroys it from the inside. I think, look at the note. I think it's here, right?
16?
Yes, note 16,
Inside
right?
the
The
sesame.
karya worm is situated inside the sesame seed. It consumes the seed from within, leaving only the outer shell intact so that the unsuspecting observer notices nothing amiss until the damage is complete. Right? I will tell you, I once had to babysit for my daughter's parakeet. She went away to camp for the summer, and before she left, she said, Abba, take care of my parakeet, right? Take care of this bird. I said, what do I have to do? She said, all you have to do is feed it, right? You just have to feed it and clean, and change the paper towel in the cage. Okay,
Sure.
so I feed the bird. She leaves, right? She feeds the bird before she leaves. I check on the bird a couple of days later, and the bird still has a whole container full of food. So I wait a few more days. Bird has a whole container full of food, right? A few more days, bird has a whole container full of food.
It leaves the shells.
A couple more days, the bird's dead, right? Because what did I not know? To me, it appeared like it had a container full of food. It had a container full of shells, but it didn't have a container full of food. The bird starved to death, right? The bird starved to death, right? Bird starved to death. So I figured I was going to outsmart my daughter. I went out and bought another bird. Right?
Didn't work.
She walked into the room and screamed, what happened to my bird? I said, what are you talking about, right? There's a blue bird right there, right? Obviously, she knew her blue bird from other blue birds. Anyway, so it took me about 10 years to recover from that. So, all right, so the same thing by the sesame seed, right? What happens with the sesame seed? And the sesame seed, you look at the sesame seed, you think it's a sesame seed, but guess what? There's nothing inside of it. I don't know what's inside of the sesame seed anyway, but there's nothing inside of the sesame seed because this karya worm has eaten through it. Similarly, I don't want to leave this out. Similarly, a promiscuous wife surreptitiously dissipates her husband's money to support her infidelity. And the husband is unaware of it until his estate is totally depleted, right? So just like this worm, right? Just like this worm consumes, right? Just like this worm consumes the inside of the sesame shell, and you think you still have sesame, right? Except it's empty. So the same thing. The guy one day checks his bank account. He's cleaned out. He's cleaned out. All right. That's what adultery does. How adultery does that? It's interesting. We'll come and talk about. Okay, so Va'amar Rav Chisda, and Rav Chisda gives us another interesting statement. Va'amar Rav Chisda, Tukfa bebeisa ki karya l'shum shama. Right? That anger which occurs in the house is like a worm in a sesame seed. It's like the karya worm in the sesame seed. Okay? Now the Gemara says, hold on to your seats. The Gemara says, Aidi va'aidi be'isisa. Both of these things are speaking about the woman. In other words, the adultery component is speaking about the woman, that when a woman commits adultery, the husband is going to find that his assets are depleted, the house is going to collapse, because it's the woman who's involved with maintaining the house. And if she's busier maintaining this adulterous relationship, she's going to neglect the matters of the house. And if she neglects the matters of the house, everything is going to come crashing down, right?
I want to turn that off now.
Right. So that's what it's talking about, right?
Now you want to
Not yet. All right.
No.
Then, right. What about the anger? So the Gemara seems to imply the same thing. We're talking about where the wife is angry at the husband. So what do you mean with the wife is angry at the husband? Well, the wife is angry at the husband. What is she going to do? She's going to spend all of his money. That's how she is going to get even with him, right? She's angry with her husband, right? She's angry with her husband. She's going to deplete his estate. She's not going to care about what happens in the house, and everything's going to come crashing down like the karya in the shum, right? Like the worm in the sesame, all right? So both, when the woman commits adultery, she's like the worm in the sesame, and when she gets angry at her husband, she's like the worm in the sesame. What happens if it's the other way around? What happens if it's the man who's committing adultery, right? Or the man who is angry. So says the Gemara, aval begavra, but when it comes to a man, leis lan ba. none of this applies. Right? When it comes to a man, none of this applies. Right? What does it mean, leis lan ba? Right? Is the Gemara making a philosophical statement here, meaning that a man is free to do whatever he wants, whereas a woman is not free to do whatever she wants? No, obviously that's not what the Gemara is saying, although there are some who could interpret it that way. What is the Gemara saying? The Gemara is saying that in general, in the times of the Gemara, it was the woman whose primary responsibility was the home. The man's primary responsibility was
Working.
okay, I guess depending upon where you grew up, right? Either learning or working, right? But it was the man who was going to bring in the dough, so to speak. Right. It's the man who's going to bring in the bread, right? He's going to bring in the bread. That's his job. His job is to deal with the outside world, to learn and to work, right? Whereas the wife, her primary responsibility is for the house and the children. So her being involved in an adulterous relationship is going to be much more detrimental to the house and the family than will his involvement in an adulterous relationship be. All right? Her anger in the house, which is going to result, right? Her anger in the house, which is going to result in her spending all of his money and not paying attention to the house. That's not the same case with him. Because if he gets angry, he's not going to spend all of his money because his money. Right? He's not going to spend all of that money, right? So that's what the Gemara means when it says leis lan ba. It doesn't mean the guy's a tzaddik. It doesn't mean we pat him on the back. It doesn't mean it's good for a man to be angry. It's not good for a man to be angry. The Rambam says that anger is not a good trait. You're not allowed to be angry at your wife. You're allowed to feign anger.
Was he single?
Right? You're allowed to feign anger. The Rambam says explicitly, you can throw dishes against the wall and break dishes if you need to feign anger to properly instruct your wife and children in how to behave. Right? You can do that. You can feign anger. Right?
This is going to be the best hits.
Right. But this might not make it to the website. But you are not allowed, says the Rambam, to actually be angry. Right? You're not allowed. You can feign anger, but you're not allowed to be angry. What?
Like if your wife
You have to
knows
say,
that.
I'm trying to teach you something.
That's right. I'm not really angry at you. Whack.
Anyway, so the Gemara is not suggesting leis lan ba means that a woman's not allowed to get angry at her husband, but a husband can get angry at his wife, and we don't care about that. Chas v'shalom. That's not what the Gemara means. The Gemara means that having a detrimental effect on the family, it's going to be much worse if the wife is angry at the husband than it's going to be if the husband is angry at the wife. If the wife is angry at the husband, so that is going to have a much more detrimental effect on the household and the family, which was her primary responsibility. And if the husband's angry at the wife, it's not going to have as much of an impact on the household and family, since that's not his prime responsibility. Okay, we'll stop here for today. Okay.
Is that right?
Whew.